Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me on this TJPS special report. If you went to public school in the United States, you were probably not taught about slavery in the way that it should have been taught. You probably were sort of essentially presented with slavery in a whitewashed version, in a way that was profoundly downplayed and misrepresented. And that's because the public education system in America is not great and uncomfortable when it comes to talking about race and the horrific past of this nation. But slavery was so much worse than what you were taught in school. And if you grew up in the South like I did, you definitely got a mild history lesson on what happened during slavery. For instance, were you aware that black babies were used as alligator bait in Florida? Probably not, right? But this really did happen. This is an accounting from a researcher in Orlando, Florida. Quote, "The slaves who had babies, they would steal the babies during the course of the day. Sometimes when their mothers weren't watching, some would be infants, some would be a year old. He said some would be toddlers. He said they would grab these children and take them down to the swamp and leave them in pens like little chicken coops. They would go down there at night, take these babies and tie them up, put a rope around their neck and around their torso, around here, and tie it tight. They'd be screaming. What they were doing would help them to chum the water." He said when they would throw the babies in, tied to this rope, he said in a matter of minutes, the alligators were on them. He said the alligators would clamp his jaws on that child. As a matter of fact, once he clamped on them, he was really swallowed. He said you couldn't see anything but the rope. Some would be infants, some would be a year old, some would be toddlers. This was actually real. Black babies were used as alligator bait. Think about how inhumane and diabolical that is. How sick of a person you have to be to do something like that. They abducted these babies and young children off of plantations. They took them away from their mothers. They put ropes around them so that they had no way to fight back or escape. And they listened to them scream as they were savagely lacerated by an alligator. That was entertaining to them. These are white supremacists already doing the worst possible things to humans, celebrating babies being eaten alive. They dangled them near the mouths of voracious 700-pound alligators. This is from the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia in Michigan. Quote, "Alligator hunting was very profitable in the 1800s to the 1900s. The skins were used to make shoes, bags, belts, and other items. However, white hunters often lost their arms and sometimes their lives as they rustled the swampy waters at night, attempting to attract alligators to surface, so they decided to use slave babies as bait. This horrendous act was later characterized in sheet music, postcards, and figurines." Not even going to continue because, you can see there how even the language in this is just vehemently racist. This was so popular among Southern racist, white people back then that they sold candy based off of this. They made postage stamps based off of this. These are real postage stamps that were used back in the 1900s, back in the 1800s, of alligators getting ready to eat black babies off of slave plantations. They made a 6th song describing this, a nursery rhyme for children to sing about black babies being eaten by alligators. This was written about in newspapers. The racist term pick nannies there refers to a small black child. Just thinking about, the most horrific parts of slavery, the most atrocious parts of slavery in this country. It's not wildly taught. It's not, wildly discussed or taught in a way that is most accurate in terms of what happened back then in U.S. schools. That's not actually the case. But yes, white supremacists in the South during slavery use black babies as alligator bait in order to get the alligator so that they then could use their skin to their benefit. But, they were getting eaten. They were getting, attacked themselves. So they used black children to win. In 2019, the New York Times broke a harrowing story. It sees here, quote, "The Oval Office meeting this past March began, as so many had, with President Trump fuming about migrants. But this time he had a solution. As White House advisors listened astonished, he ordered them to shut down the entire 2,000-mile border with Mexico by noon the next day. The advisors feared the president's edict would trap American tourists in Mexico, strand children at schools on both sides of the border, and create an economic meltdown in two countries. Yet they also knew how the president's zeal to stop immigration had sent him lurching for solutions, one more extreme than the next. Privately, the president had often talked about fortifying a border wall with a water-filled trench stocked with snakes or alligators, prompting aides to seek a cost estimate. He wanted the wall electrified with spikes on top so essentially it could pierce human flesh. After publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot migrants if they threw rocks, the president backed off when his staff told him that it was illegal. But later in a meeting, aides recalled he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. That's not allowed either, they told him. So you have this 2019 Oval Office meeting with Donald Trump and his staff, and the president is growing extremely angry, because immigration is something that he ran on, mass deportation, also essentially just being extremely xenophobic. He's like, I have a solution. Why don't we just shoot migrants in the legs? Why don't we let them get eaten by alligators and get bitten by snakes? That'll sure deter them from coming into the United States. This inhumane, nefarious tactic, this thinking by Donald Trump. And at the time, under the first administration, there were not all yes men. There were people to counter the insanity and the diabolical thinking and actions of that administration. There were people to counter that. The thing is, Donald Trump ran for re-election. He did not win re-election, but he then ran for re-election again after Joe Biden was in office. And on this time, he would make sure that not only were there going to be people in office that were going to be yes men to him, but also that the mass deportation effort this time would be more cruel, that we would amp up that xenophobia. In November of 2023, while he was running for re-election, the New York Times dropped another bombshell article here, this time highlighting what Donald Trump would do if back in power. As you can see, it reads here, "Sweeping raids, giant camps, and mass deportation inside Trump's 2025 immigration plans." The article goes on to discuss how, according to Trump's plans, both legal and illegal immigration would be heavily curtailed. So they wouldn't just go after the illegal immigrants. They would also go after legal immigrants as well. They would go after people with legal status. Everyone is under attack. No one is safe. And what is possibly one of the most harrowing parts of this article, it reads here, quote, "Mr. Trump wants to build huge camps to detain people while their cases are processed and they await deportation flights." End quote. So they don't just want to, deport the immigrants, but they also want to hold them in camps too. And it's not just going to be immigrants in those camps. Who else do you think they would throw in there? Practically anyone, including political rivals or critics of the president. Because what is the goal when it comes to every authoritarian country, right? The goal is intimidation. The goal is to make the people suffer, make the people afraid, make them think twice about criticizing the government. After the election, Texas became the first state to offer up a ranch for mass deportation use. You can build the camps here, Mr. President. You don't even have to ask us. They just offered up a ranch. They just offered up some land. We've reported here on this show how they're sending migrants to Guantanamo Bay with no working showers. They are still doing that, by the way, sending hundreds more from Africa, Asia, Europe, and other countries. In February of this year, The U.S. Army announced that they plan to hold up to 30,000 migrants at military bases across the country. We're watching right now in 2025 as immigrants are being haunted, abducted, and sent to concentration camps. Their newest one is called Alligator Alcatraz because Donald Trump finally got his wish. If migrants even think about running away this time, as he promised and wanted in that Oval Office meeting back in 2019, there'll be an alligator to eat them. Because what other time in U.S. history was that done? And let's be clear, as a historian and as a journalist that reports on this hellhole, I'm only going to have to refer to it as Alligator Auschwitz. I mean, because we have to call this out for what this is. The President of the United States is essentially implying that if migrants run away, they can be mauled by alligators. If they try to get out, they can be mauled by alligators because the entire facility will be surrounded by them, and also snakes, and also the Florida heat, and also there's no AC. Think about that. Those are inhumane conditions. Inhumane conditions. Why do I refer to it as Alligator Auschwitz, as other people are saying the same thing? I mean, look at the comparisons. The beds. The people laughing. The cruelty is the point. No, they do not have a soul. Just like the white supremacist slave owners who fed black children to alligators like they were nothing, the Trump administration is full of white supremacists who thrive off of this. They love seeing immigrants haunted and living in fear. That's what they want. That's what keeps them entertained. According to CBS News, the Republican Party of Florida has taken to fundraise off this new concentration camp by selling branded t-shirts and beer koozies emblazoned with the name. We did check to verify that, and look, it's real. It is real. This is literally Alligator Alcatraz merch. Does that remind you of anything? Who else in our history benefited off of alligators eating minorities? Remember, they sold candies, they sung songs, they wrote about it in the newspapers, postage stamps. It's not like they're being subtle here. It is the same thing, different time. Cruelty is the point, and it always has been. MAGA influencer Laura Loomer said earlier this week, quote, "Alligator lives matter. The good news is alligators are guaranteed at least 65 million meals if we get started now." And I'm going to read that to you again. Alligators' lives matter. The good news is alligators are guaranteed at least 65 million meals if we get started now. What does she mean by 65 million meals? Oh, she's referring to the entire Latino population here in the United States of America. So she's straight up calling for genocide here. Genocide of the entire Latino population here in the United States. This is what they want. It was never about, oh, you can't come over the border illegally. It was never about illegal immigration. It was always about simply pointing the United States to a time of eugenics when we had the most racist people in office, like Calvin Coolidge back in the 1920s. Presidents who practiced eugenics, presidents who essentially signed legislation and championed laws that ensured that the United States would remain a white supremacist country because we cannot let too many minorities win. Because we cannot have a flourishing minority population. And if they try to sustain themselves and to build themselves up, we will burn everything to the ground. As we saw in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and other parts of the country in numerous historical examples when it comes to minorities doing anything possible to succeed. This is where we are again as a country, except this time it is infinitely worse. It is extremely worse. The most inhumane, nefarious actions are taking place under the guise of only we want legal immigration. But even then, we just don't want any immigrants at all. Because we thrive off of hate. We thrive off of seeing people suffer. We thrive off of seeing babies being ripped away from their parents. We thrive off of seeing, kids deported with cancer. When it comes to Alligator Auschwitz, they built this in 8 days. 8 days, and it's already ready to be open? What about inspections? You really built it that fast, and all the inspections, everything is clear? It's 28,000 plus feet of barbed wire and 400 security with 200 cameras. It will cost Florida taxpayers approximately $450 million to run the facility for a year. $450 million. It expects to hold 3,000 people. But if you remember anything about the last Trump administration, these immigration detention facilities are very overcrowded and also consistently in health violation. This week, the first group of immigrants arrived here, but there still remains serious concerns. Not only the scorching hot sun of Florida, but hurricane season is also about to start, and this tent is outside. It would be completely blown away. You also have to worry about mosquito-borne diseases, which can cause neurological damage and inflammation of the brain, which for there is no treatment, according to doctors. Just like in other cases across the country, in Florida, lawmakers have essentially been denied access to Alligator Auschwitz. Representative Angie Nixon said, quote, "I was bitten by insects as soon as I got here. My lips started to swell and I'm outside for just a few minutes. Imagine what it's like for people inside who don't have bug spray or clean bedding." End quote. We have already seen footage of flooding in this facility here. And people are supposed to sleep and live there? But don't worry, because Ron DeSantis wants to open up another one of these in due time. Let's open up a second concentration camp in Florida. Sure, Mr. President, we'll be on that. We're also about to see another one of these in Alabama after 2 private companies just got awarded contracts with the Department of Homeland Security. And it's not like it's just there. Other companies are cashing in on this too. Back in April, the Texas Tribune and ProPublica did a joint investigative report on a tent company holding migrants in El Paso, Texas. According to the Department of Defense's website, this company was awarded a nearly $140 million contract. And even though this is ICE's job, DOD would not provide a response as to why ICE would be using military funds, which is honestly inexplicable. Why is ICE, an immigration agency, using money from the Department of Defense to give a private company, a contract? It doesn't make any sense. But migrants are here right now at this tent concentration camp. Reportedly, it has the capacity to house 1,000 adults. According to the Project on Government Oversight, Geo Group and CoreCivic, 2 of these large private prison companies who are now in contract with the government, donated very graciously to Donald Trump's re-election campaign. Geo Group donated more than $1 million to get Trump reelected, and CoreCivic donated $500,000, so just $500,000, to his inaugural committee. Last month, the EPA quietly dropped their legal case against Geo Group. They dropped their lawsuit. They had previously brought this lawsuit under the Biden administration, alleging inhumane conditions in these facilities operated by Geo Group. Employees used disinfectants, which can cause irreversible eye damage and skin burns. Migrants did not have proper eye protection wear or protective clothing. Quote, the agency alleged that Geo Group's employees wore nitrile exam gloves that were labeled extra soft and not intended for use as a general chemical barrier. In a separate pending lawsuit, people who were detained at the detention center alleged they were sickened by the company's liberal use of a different disinfectant. A hearing had yet to be scheduled before an administrative law judge. The maximum penalty for the company's alleged misuse of HALT is more than $4 million. But a notice filed on Friday by Matthew Salazar, a manager in the EPA's Enforcement and Compliance Assurance Division, stated that the EPA's case against the GEO Group would be dropped. The notice did not provide an explanation. End quote. So they dropped the case against GEO Group. They did not provide an explanation. I mean, I can think of a reason. They're not only a huge donor to Trump. Why would you want to accept them? Why would you want to upset those people? But also, what was that? Pam Bondi, the now Attorney General of the United States, was a lobbyist for GEO Group back in 2019? Double conflict of interest. See, this is where we are right now. I said, a couple shows ago that you have to constantly stay up to date when it comes to the self-dealings and the corruption and its ties under the Trump administration, because that's where we are. Anything that is associated with them or connected to their past business life, where they were frugal off of, or they had past connections to, you can't police those people, can't hold those people accountable. Guess we're just going to have to drop the lawsuit, even though we have egregious conditions being described at these facilities. We're also getting reports that they are making migrants work. Essentially, a GEO Group is worth billions of dollars, and they're only paying migrants $1 a day to work. $1 a day. They are being asked to clean and to do a whole bunch of other stuff for $1 a day. They said that the state minimum wage does not apply to detained migrants. This is reporting from ProPublica about a concentration camp, really, from operating from this massive prison company, GEO Group, in Tacoma, Washington, with 1,575 beds, and they're forced to prepare their own food, to wash their own clothes, to scrub their toilets. But listen to this: ProPublica reports that they could hire people. The company could hire people, but you know what? That would be too much money. And also, that's going to be 85 people, so that's 85 salaries. This is $1 billion company. Their stock is worth over $4 billion. You got the money. They have been sued over this, and this has led to them hiring temporarily some contractors to help out cleaning. But multiple courts have decided that essentially the Fair Labor Standards Act, which sets the federal minimum wage, does not apply to detained migrants. Apparently, they are prepared to fight this all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if they have to. The court is set to review it very soon, but, how do we think that the same Supreme Court that we are currently living under, how do we think that they are going to rule? Quote, if eventually forced to pay state minimum wages across the country, the company could decide to pay detainees more or else hire outside employees at all its locations, either of which would potentially eat into its profits, stock price, and dividends. End quote. According to Maru Villalpando, founder of the activist group La Resistencia, dinner used to be served at 5, then 6 p.m. Now it's 9 p.m. when dinner is served. The conditions that we're getting out of these facilities is extremely, extremely horrifying and horrific and dire. I mean, think about stuff like sexual assault and abuse and medical neglect and lack of food and not getting communication with your family, and also due process being denied. I mean, stuff like this, SOS signs that we're getting this year out of these immigrant detention facilities all across the country. This is happening right now as we speak. I remember covering the first Trump administration back when I was 13 to 15 years old. And one of the things that was extremely stark and dire when I covered it was the grotesque conditions of immigration detention facilities then during COVID. I mean, we got reports of sexual assault happening. We got reports of ICE agents raping and molesting young girls. We got reports of food that was expired. We got reports of COVID just running rampant in these facilities. Migrants getting sick because they were looked at as migrants, illegals, not looked at as humans of this earth. That's what we are contending with right now, but something far worse. Because if this is what they're doing to them on the streets, beating them and aggressively arresting them, what do you think they're doing to them inside these places? This week, Geo Group got a new contract for $60 million to build a 770-bed camp in San Diego, California. So they just keep getting more money here. Last month, the U.S. Marshals Service gave Geo Group a $147 million contract with them for secure transport services. So again, it is these private companies that are operating, that are cashing in the most off of what Donald Trump's mass deportation campaign is promising. Because if we're going to be rounding immigrants up in this country, they're going to have somewhere to go. So, Geo Group, Core Civic, hey, you want them? Do whatever, pay them $1, treat them like trash. But hey, they got to go somewhere as they await deportation. All of this comes as the new big evil law championed by Trump and Republicans will make ICE the largest law enforcement agency in the nation with a $45 billion budget, 100,000 new migrant beds for more concentration camps across the country, 10,000 new ICE agents on the ground with a $10,000 signing bonus. So we're going to be seeing more raids all over the place in lots of communities. This law rewards states who work with ICE a $10 billion grant. And it increases fees for immigrants for things like asylum, temporary protected status, court hearings, and limit them to accessing federal benefits. It permits $300 billion to be directed toward immigration purposes and $45 billion for a non-existent, nonsensical border wall that he has been championing to his supporters for years. Effectively for a decade at this point. It was never about, we're only going to get the illegals out of here. It was always about attacking everyone. Because going back to the history of this country, that's where it always has been at. And when you just look at what has happened over the course of the 6 months that Donald Trump has been president and investigating what's been going on with mass deportation, the amount of special reports that I've done, it also goes out to how they are being treated and what is going on in these facilities. We know that earlier this week, Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers, they released essentially their filing here when it comes to the government, because of course the government has apprehended him. He's being put on trial for essentially, bogus charges here. But I want to read to you how Mr. Garcia was treated in CCOT, because we do have, him talking about being tortured while he was deported to CCOT in El Salvador. I'm going to read this to you here. Quote, In the early afternoon of Wednesday, March 12, 2025, after completing a shift as a sheet metal worker apprentice at a new job site in Baltimore, plaintiff Abrego Garcia picked up his 5-year-old son, AAV, from his grandmother's house. While driving with his son, AAV, in the back seat, plaintiff Abrego Garcia was pulled over by ICE officers acting at the direction and under the supervision of defendant Baker's predecessor in office. One ICE officer who identified himself as part of Homeland Security investigations told Plaintiff Abrego Garcia that his status had changed. Within minutes, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was handcuffed and detained in one of several ICE vehicles on the scene. Plaintiff Vasquez Suda, of course this is Abrego Garcia's wife here, was called and instructed to appear at their location within 10 minutes to get her 5-year-old son AAV. Otherwise, the ICE officers threatened that the child would be handed over to Child Protective Services. The ICE officers who carried out this vehicle stop and subsequent arrests did not have a warrant, nor did they have any articulable reason to believe that Plaintiff Abrego Garcia would flee before a warrant could be obtained. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia's supervised release was not revoked by the Executive Associate Commissioner, nor by the District Director. Nor did reasons exist to believe that circumstances did not reasonably permit referral of the case to the Executive Associate Commissioner. After Plaintiff Vasquez Suda arrived at the scene, she was able to briefly talk with Plaintiff Abrego Garcia, who appeared confused, distraught, and crying. Moments later, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was driven away. No explanation was provided to Jennifer Vasquez Suda, his wife, as to why her husband was detained, where he was going, or what was happening. Almost immediately after Plaintiff Vasquez Suda left with her son, AAV, she began to try to locate Plaintiff Abrego Garcia through the online ICE detainee locator system and by calling various immigration detention centers and facilities. Upon information and belief between Wednesday, March 12th and Saturday, March 15th, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was moved to various different locations across the country. The evening after his arrest, Plaintiff Vasquez Suda received a call from Plaintiff Abrego Garcia. At the time, he was in Baltimore, where he had been brought immediately after his arrest for interrogation. During that conversation, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia informed his wife that he was being questioned about gang affiliations. He reportedly informed his interviewers that he was never a gang member and had no gang affiliations. He was shown several photos where he appeared in public and asked about other people in those photos, but was unable to provide any information on them, as he did not know them or know anything about them. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia also told his wife that he had been told that he had understood he would go before an immigration judge and then be released. Following his interrogation in Baltimore, officers instructed Abrego Garcia to sign documents without adequate explanation of their contents or legal significance. He was subsequently placed with approximately 10 other detainees and transported to BWI Airport. At no time was Plaintiff Abrego Garcia informed as to the reasons why his supervised release was revoked, nor given the opportunity to be heard by any means of the required interview as to why it should be restored. Despite Plaintiff Abrego Garcia's repeated assertions that he possessed a valid employment authorization document, officials disregarded this information and placed him on a flight to Louisiana. In Louisiana, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia explicitly requested to speak with an ICE agent. When granted this opportunity, he clearly communicated that he had received judicial relief and needed to speak with a judge. The ICE agent falsely assured Plaintiff Abrego Garcia that he was not being deported to El Salvador, but rather being transported to Texas to appear before a judge. Relying on this misrepresentation, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia cooperated with further transport. Consistent with this account, Plaintiff Vasquez Suda received a call from Plaintiff Abrego Garcia on the evening of March 13th. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia told his wife that he believed he was in Louisiana, but was not sure because he had been moved around so many times. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia advised his wife, that he was very confused. However, he still was being assured falsely that he would be soon brought before an immigration judge. In an attempt to ascertain his actual location and find further information about his arrest and detention, Plaintiff Vasquez Suda called different detention centers, trying to speak to someone. She recalls one brief conversation where she was told that, quote, El Salvador was asking for him. Her attempts to protest by explaining that Plaintiff Abrego Garcia had won protection from being removed to El Salvador fell on deaf ears. Upon arrival in Texas, officers separated Plaintiff Abrego Garcia and 4 to 5 other Salvadorians from the remaining passengers. The detainees were confined to a stationary bus for an entire day while officials waited for additional deportees to arrive. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia overheard ICE agents discussing plans to transport detainees to CICOT in El Salvador. This was the first time Plaintiff Abrego Garcia learned that officials had been misleading him about being brought before a judge and that they instead intended to deport him. Around 11 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, March 15, 2025, Plaintiff Vasquez Suda received a call from Plaintiff Abrego Garcia. During that conversation, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia informed her that he was being held by ICE at the East Hidalgo Detention Center in La Villa, Texas. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia then relayed that he was told he was being deported to El Salvador. With a sense of urgency, he asked his wife to contact his mother so their family could get him from CICOT, as that is where he was told they were sending him. The following morning, officials processed Plaintiff Abrego Garcia through a crowded office, calling detainees individually and loading them onto buses. The transport caravan proceeded to the airport under significant security, including helicopter surveillance. At the airport, multiple federal agencies were present, including FBI, DEA, and ICE personnel. Throughout the entire process, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia continuously informed officials that he possessed legal permission to remain and work in the United States until 2029 and had been granted without withholding of removal. He repeatedly requested judicial review. Officials consistently responded with false assurances that he would see a judge, deliberately misleading Plaintiff Abrego Garcia to prevent him from taking actions to assert his legal rights. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia only realized that the true nature of his dire situation upon arrival at the airport in El Salvador, at which point it was too late to challenge the unlawful deportation. On Sunday, March 16th, his wife was sent a photo from a news article discussing the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members that were deported without a hearing. The photo showed men kneeling on the ground with their shaved heads bowed and their arms over their head. Their faces were not visible. Upon inspection, Jennifer identified one of those men as Plaintiff Abrego Garcia, based on her husband's 2 scars on his head and personally selected, unaffiliated, and distinctive tattoos. For the next few days, the ICE detainee locator continued to indicate that Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was located at the East Hidalgo Detention Center, even though staff at the detention center told Plaintiff Vasquez Suda that he had left on Saturday. Watching the news, Plaintiff Vasquez Suda was horrified to see more photos of CICOT prisoners that included her husband and a video where Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was frog-walked through the CICOT prison. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia family hired a lawyer in El Salvador who had confirmed that Plaintiff Abrego Garcia is in fact being held at CICOT. To date, there are no known criminal charges levied against Plaintiff Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. ICE and DHS took no steps to reopen the removal case of Plaintiff Abrego Garcia, nor to challenge or rescind his withholding order. Defendants, including defendants Lome Leons, Ganalo, and the predecessor in the office of Defendant Baker, decided to deport Plaintiff Abrego Garcia without following the law, end quote. So I'm going to pause there. So what they're talking about here is Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and they're also talking about other various officials in the government, including acting ICE directors who participated in this whole ordeal. I'm going to continue now. Quote, "They did so knowing and having arranged and intended that the government of El Salvador would detain Plaintiff Abrego Garcia in CICOT immediately upon arrival. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia had exhausted all administrative remedies. No administrative remedies were available to Plaintiff Abrego Garcia precisely because defendants made the choice to unlawfully forego proceedings before the immigration judge, which would entail a right to administrative review before the Board of Immigration Appeals and then a petition for review to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. On March 15, 2025, defendants deported 261 non-citizens, including 231 Venezuelan nationals and 23 Salvadorian nationals, to El Salvador without going through any legal process whatsoever in front of an immigration judge. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was one of those 23 Salvadorian nationals who were sent to the country's mega prison, CICOT, the Terrorism Confinement Center. Upon information and belief, all defendants are aware that the government of El Salvador tortures individuals in CICOT. Indeed, U.S. President Donald Trump has made comments to the press expressing glee and delight at the torture that the government of El Salvador inflicts upon detainees in CICOT. CICOT conditions have garnered attention from human rights organizations. Each of the 256 cells is intended to hold approximately 80 inmates, but often holds nearly double. The cramped cells are equipped with tired metal bunks without mattresses, 2 basins for washing, and 2 open toilets. There are no windows, fans, or air conditioning, despite the region's warm and humid climate. Inmates in CICOT are confined to their cell for 23.5 hours a day, 23 and a half hours a day, and cannot go outdoors. They are denied access to reading materials, including even letters from friends or family. Inmates are prohibited from receiving visits from family and friends. Meals are provided through the bars, and the facility enforces strict regulations to maintain order. I'm going to skip here to paragraph 116. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia reports that he was subjected to severe mistreatment upon arrival at CICOT, including but not limited to severe beatings, severe sleep deprivation, inadequate nutrition, and psychological torture. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was the first name called to disembark the plane that transported him to El Salvador on March 15, 2025. As he exited the aircraft, still in chains, 2 officials grabbed his arms and pushed him down the stairs, forcing his head down. There were strong lights illuminating the area despite it being nighttime, and cameras were filming the detainee's arrival. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was pushed toward a bus, forcibly seated and fitted with a second set of chains and handcuffs. He was repeatedly struck by officers when he attempted to raise his head. He observed an ICE agent on the bus communicating with Salvadorian officials to confirm the identities of the Salvadorian nationals on board before the bus departed. Upon arrival at CICOT, the detainees were greeted by a prison official who stated, "Welcome to CICOT. Whoever enters here doesn't leave." Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was then forced to strip, issued prison clothing, and subjected to physical abuse, including being kicked in the legs with boots and struck on his head and arms to make him change clothes faster. His head was shaved with a zero razor, and he was frog marched to cell 15, being struck with wooden batons along the way. By the following day, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia had visible bruises and lumps all over his body. In cell 15, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia and 20 other Salvadorians were forced to kneel approximately 9 o'clock p.m. to 6 o'clock p.m., with guards striking anyone who fell from exhaustion. During this time, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was denied bathroom access and soiled himself. The detainees were confined to metal bunks with no mattresses in an overcrowded cell with no windows, bright lights that remained on 24 hours a day, and minimal access to sanitation. After approximately 1 week at CICOT, prison director Osiris Luna and other officials separated the 21 Salvadorians who had arrived together. 12 individuals with visible gang-related tattoos were moved to another cell, while Plaintiff Abrego Garcia remained with 8 others who, like him, upon information and belief, had no gang affiliations or tattoos. As reflected by his segregation, the Salvadorian authorities recognized the plaintiff Abrego Garcia was not affiliated with any gang, and at around this time, prison officials explicitly acknowledged that plaintiff Abrego Garcia's tattoos were not gang-related, telling him, quote, "Your tattoos are fine." While at CICOT, prison officials reportedly told Plaintiff Abrego Garcia that they would transfer him to cells containing gang members, who they assured him would tear him apart. Indeed, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia repeatedly observed prisoners in nearby cells who he understood to be gang members violently harm each other with no intervention from guards or personnel. Screams from nearby cells would similarly ring out throughout the night, without any response from prison guards or personnel. During his first 2 weeks at CCOT, plaintiff Abrego Garcia suffered a significant deterioration in his physical condition and lost approximately 31 pounds, dropping from approximately 215 pounds to 184 pounds. On April 9th, plaintiff Abrego Garcia and 4 others were transferred to a different module in CCOT, where they were photographed with mattresses and better food. Photos that appeared to be staged to document improved conditions. On or about April 10th, 2025, plaintiff Abrego Garcia was transferred alone to the Central Industrial Prison facility in Santa Ana, El Salvador. While at Central Industrial, plaintiff Abrego Garcia was frequently hidden from visitors, being told to remain in a separate room whenever outside visitors came to the facility. During his entire time in detention in El Salvador, plaintiff Abrego Garcia was denied any communication with his family and access to counsel until Senator Van Hollen visited him on April 17th, 2025. And of course, that famous picture with Senator Van Hollen visiting his constituent out of Maryland there was posted. Quote, since the Supreme Court affirmed the district court's order requiring the defendants facilitate Abrego Garcia's release and return from custody in El Salvador and ensure the plaintiff Abrego Garcia's case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador, numerous high-ranking government officials, including defendants, have publicly stated that they would not comply with the court's order. And then it goes on to list essentially the people have said this. He's not coming back. And you can see that was publicly reported widely across the press throughout the time back in April. Abrego Garcia, he is not coming back to the United States. He is not coming back. There's no scenario where Abrego Garcia will be in the United States again. 133 here, quote, these statements represent only a sampling of the numerous public declarations by defendants and other associated high-ranking government officials demonstrating their categorical refusal to comply with the orders of the district and Supreme Court. End quote. So I know there has been wide reporting, of course, for weeks about what's been going on in these detention facilities, what's been going on in, the effective concentration camp back in CCOT. But I feel like even when this just came out, I mean, all these pages, when this just came out earlier this week, about, the torture that he was subjected to, the paragraph that a lot of people just jumped to was the torture, what was described, and that's it. But I felt like when I was reading the lawsuit here, when I was reading this, this legal filing, I felt it was important to tell the full story, to get the whole story. Because, I mean, you go back, it starts with Abrego Garcia here. He completes a shift at work as a sheet metal worker, and then he's picked up. He's stopped by ICE. He picked up his 5-year-old son from his grandmother's house. While driving with his son in the back seat, plaintiff Abrego Garcia was pulled over by ICE officers acting at the direction and under the supervision of defendant Baker's predecessor in office. That's when he is taken. He's taken off the streets. That's what it is like for immigrants in this country right now. They're not just going door to door. No, they're stopping them in the streets. Hey, get out the car. And effectively lying to them about getting legal representation and then just sending them off to foreign prisons notorious for human rights abuses. This is what the United States government under Donald Trump and his administration of white supremacists and xenophobic officials are doing. This is what's happening. I feel like when it comes to putting these reports together, I feel like what's most disastrous to the mind, to someone's health, is when you cover stories like this, because, yesterday it was Abrego Garcia, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Tomorrow it's going to be someone else. Today it's someone else. As we're speaking, as I'm watching this, it's as someone, you're watching this right now, it's someone else happening right now. We are living through a period in which immigrants are being haunted and hunted down and chased after and viciously beaten and kidnapped off the streets and sent to foreign concentration camps. And oh, by the way, we're building them here and we're selling merch and we're laughing about it. That's happening here. That is happening here right now in this moment. And so, if you wonder what you would have done or how you would have reacted in the Nazi Germany era, it's what you're doing right now. Are you protesting? Are you, exhibiting any type of collective resistance? Are you donating to democratic institutions or organizations or to officials who are trying to make things better and be the resistance? What are you doing to help counter this? Because this is hell. This is diabolical. This is nefarious. Eternal damnation is a thing. It is. And every single person who has joked about this, who has partaken in this, who has sicked these ICE agents all across the country on innocent people, they will see it. And it's also understanding that ICE has just been given an even bigger budget to do more of these atrocities all across the country. Think about what that means. These raids are about to get worse. And soon they're not going to be just targeting just immigrants. It's going to be everyone. You don't agree with the president? You speak out. Hey, you got a Substack and you say something that I don't like? Arrest that writer. Arrest that journalist. I'm well aware of the ramifications for consistent, resistant reporting that I do here on the show. But it is rather worth to go down as a defender of democracy than as someone who stood on the sidelines and said and did nothing.